This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. All right, welcome back to the Hype Squad. We've got Cynthia Mitchell back today, so I'm so excited to talk more with her. Cynthia, last time you were on, I read the intro for you. This time, I want you to tell us in your own words just a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on right now.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me back. I'm so happy to spend more time with you. So yeah, I recently became a single mom and just moved to a new area. I'm living in Milton, Florida, which is just kind of right outside of Pensacola. Just moved to this area, rediscovering myself, what I do, what I'm working on right now. I'm kind of a multifaceted entrepreneur. I don't even know if I can claim that,
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I'm a facilitator of space holding. So for the past 10 years, I've been teaching yoga, meditation, ceremonies, and just workshops on connecting yourself to the earth. So my business is called Eka Earth. It means one earth. And I'm all about helping people connect to themselves so that they can then connect to the earth, and using the earth as a tool to connect to yourself, just your environment and the elements around you. And my latest undertaking, space holding, love, passion project is photography and element mandalas, which is a whole thing. If you're curious about that, you can look at my website, ecaearth.com. Yeah, so that's kind of what my big project is right now, is doing empowerment shoots. So trying to make the experience not about, hey, I'm in front of the camera and this is how I'm going to pose and this is what I'm going to get out of the shoot, but really trying to make it more of a sacred ceremonial experience, to where when you're 90, you have these images of yourself that are kind of showcasing that moment in time of who you are and your own sacredness. So I do a lot of shoots outside. People tend to get naked in front of me, which is a whole thing that I did not expect to come out of when I started doing photography. But it's been really expansive to see and note that is something people need. And I think it ties into what we were talking about the last time I was here, and being proud of yourself, and this kind of rise or undertaking that humans are craving right now, is to feel pride for themselves. And I think the style of photography that I'm offering is really niching that for people, or providing that platform for people. So it's been a happy, really happy, pleasant surprise in going into photography.
I love it. I think it's just another example of space holding. And I'm going to have you on here separately to talk more about that, because I think that being able to capture people in the elements and in their sacredness and who they really are, as opposed to being like staged and like very fake, which we talked about that briefly in our last episode. I love that you're doing it, and you're incredible. You're also a really good writer. You didn't say that on here, but anyone who has or will ever follow your Instagram account, like your captions on your Instagram post are like, it's like poetry. Some of them, like it's such good writing. I want to talk really quickly before we totally dive in to today's topic about, and you said it earlier, like, and it's so funny because I do the same thing. That word entrepreneur is such a sticky word. And I think it's only really sticky for women. I've never heard a man not use it like super proudly. And I cringe when I say it. And, obviously I'm not going to look up the exact definition of entrepreneur, but it's a business owner, a person who creates businesses, things of that nature, multiple businesses, right? You have like serial entrepreneurs, and then, you have people who are just entrepreneurs that love what they do specifically. I would consider my husband kind of a serial entrepreneur. Myself, no, like my sole focus is not starting and selling businesses. But I want to talk about why that word is so hard to use. Like, you are a business owner, you run multiple aspects of your business and facilitate and hold space in multiple, like, so many different ways. But yet, that word entrepreneur, it's like, why? What do you think? And you may not have an answer to this, and maybe this is just a general question for anyone listening, but it's like, what level do we feel as women that we need to be at to use that word confidently? Right? Like, what would your business need to be for you to say, I'm an entrepreneur, period? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because as I was saying it, I like now in review, in retrospect, I was like, am I worthy of that word?
Mm,
Like, so that leads me to go like, what other areas of your life are you not allowing yourself to be worthy of, Cynthia?
hmm. Mm. I love when shit like that comes up in real time and it's like, oh, she did the same thing that I do. Like, she cringed a little bit when she used that word and hesitated. I do the same thing. And I typically caveat with, I'm an entrepreneur. I hate using that word, but I am. And because I always feel like, and we talked about this a little bit in the last episode about, caveating a compliment to yourself. So here's the thing. And anyone listening, if you own your own business, or if you plan to, or if there's a word that you're uncomfortable using when you refer to yourself, I want to give us all a homework assignment. And for you and I, Cynthia, here and now, we are both entrepreneurs. And I want us to practice saying that word confident as fuck. Like, I am an entrepreneur, and not like hesitating, not caveating it with anything, just period. Right? You think you can do it? It's gonna be hard for
Yeah.
me, but I'm gonna try.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to question myself. Like,
All right, let's say it. You go first.
I am an entrepreneur. I own my own business. I make my own money. I do all the things that I have to do that. I do it.
Yes.
No one's helping me.
Yes. 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 Ah, I love it. Okay. Well, that's not the topic of today's podcast, but it's a great intro and great way to start. So, Cynthia and I have a whole list of topics that we want to do separate episodes on. And I feel like every time we talk, we add like two or three things to the list because there's so many pivotal things. And one of the reasons why I am really excited to have this platform, and, Cynthia is basically going to be like my co-host for so many of these episodes. I These are conversations that I want other women to witness, to hear, to be motivated by. And I think it's really important for when people can have them comfortably, have them out loud so people can hear them. And one of the things that came up in our last episode was talking about, you know, quality alone time, whether that's like traveling by yourself or going out and doing something that you're scared to do. Like, and it's deeper than that. It's like learning who you are, trusting yourself, all of those things. And we both really wanted to dive more into that today. So I'm going to give you the floor, Cynthia, just to kind of start the conversation about what your experience has been finding yourself, learning yourself. What avenue did it take for you to really like meet yourself? I know you mentioned that in the last episode, like you remember specifically finding yourself and what that looked and felt like for you. Tell me all the things.
Well, I think that there's a God so much. I think step one is like recognizing or being able to say like maybe I don't know myself, and that's kind of scary. Like maybe I don't know what my passion is, and that's uncomfortable. Um, and that's like number one. And then God, I'll tell you about the moment that I met myself, and it's going to sound super woo woo, but a lot of me is woo woo. So
I
here
love
we are.
it. Give it
Um,
to me.
I was in Guatemala, and I was in a cacao ceremony, which if you've never experienced a cacao ceremony, I'll just recommend to everyone. They're out there, they're everywhere, cacao's everywhere. Fine.
Explain what cacao is, like a brief little synopsis of what that experience is like.
So cacao is the pure chocolate. Okay, chocolate, if anyone doesn't know, comes in a pod. It kind of looks like a squash, like a yellow squash, and then you cut it open and it has these beans in it. And then those are taken, and it has meat in it, fruit meat. Okay, the beans are taken out, they're dry roasted, depending on where you get it, how it's processed. This is why I say do your research. I can send Charli a link to a very pure cacao brand if you ever want to order any. Anyways, usually when we have chocolate, there's sugar and cream added. This is just pure chocolate, roasted and then packaged and then broken down into a drink that you drink. It's bitter, it's not sweet. And the effect that it has on the body, we tend to think that it's usually called like a love drug. It opens the heart. So a lot of ceremonies will kind of guide you in that direction to focus on like heart chakra, but it's not just the heart. So when I did my training to serve cacao, I learned it opens all the blood vessels in the body. So it opens pathways and energetically, but also physically, the blood vessels in your body, so that while you're kind of on your cacao high, which it's not like a trip or of any sort, but you're experiencing a lot of emotional blood pumping, flowing. So you're kind of able to, tap into a source, God, power, something outside of yourself, or just get out of your own way, like get out of your own head, feel yourself in a way that maybe you're not in your day to day. And so I was sitting with Cacao, the man I learned cacao from, Cacao, Shaman Keith. He's kind of an entrepreneur in this, and he recently passed. He taught many. He's kind of like the pioneer of serving cacao in Western world. And I just was in meditation, and without being I was in a safe space, and I don't know, I just felt like these, I haven't really shared this with many people, like these colors and this essence and this pureness, consciousness. It sounds so woo, but it's just what I felt like, this thread of myself that was easeful and joyful and unrestricted. And it never left. Like it was like this energy outside of me telling me, you're okay, this is who you are, you're whole, you're enough, and this is familiar, this is you at your core, without all of the layers of shame or doubt or judgment or fears that like social conditioning, family, bondage ties that we've acquired throughout our life. And that's a place I always come back to. So that's when I met myself in that pureness, and realized I am good. Like I am a good person, and like I am valid. And then that was very early on in my getting to know myself, right? And then I started traveling more. So I was alone in Guatemala. I was doing my yoga teacher training at School Yoga Institute. And from that point on, it gave me permission to continue to want to know that part of me. And so that's kind of like a guiding force that changed the trajectory of everything in my life, of how I made decisions, how I interacted with others, how I interacted with myself. because that felt good. And I did not want to lose that, because up until that point, I mean, I was in a physically abusive marriage, just to kind of like, I was broken.
Mm,
And that spark, that light, that inner knowing was such a small amount of time in my life. And it's like such fleeting moment, because it came and it went, right? But it gave me so much trust in myself to take steps that I needed to take to change, to continue to learn about myself.
mm, I love that. And it reminded me of my own story with breath work. I want to ask you, though, before I share my experience, how do you hold on to that? Like, how do you reconnect with that energy or that essence that you found in that cacao ceremony? Just like in a day that you really need to reconnect to her, like, how do you bring that back in to your consciousness? Do you have a way that you can teach me or anyone listening that could go back to that place?
Well, I think that that's a multifaceted answer. But the first thing I want to say is some days it's not accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Accepting that is a big place that we miss the mark in our like self-awareness practice, is because we expect that to be available every single day. And that can be very discouraging, especially if you're a person that is trying to get to know themselves. It's like, oh, I'm like, say you just heard this and you're like, I'm going to go to a cacao ceremony and I'm going to have this like enlightening experience and I'm going to know myself and my life's going to be clear. It might not look like that. Like, accepting that,
Yeah.
because then we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. Number one, because like we talked about in the last podcast, is like we're constantly evolving. Our life is constantly shifting, and what worked one day may not work another day. So being my tool that I've learned, and really through motherhood, I learned this, because before I was a mom, right, I did have all these like XYZ tools that could bring me back to that place. Breath is number one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's always available. You can always slow it down. You can always change it. It is you. Nature, going outside, a lot of different things I can talk about that, but I'll just say nature. Um, and journaling was a big one for me. So before I had a kid, all of those things were things that I incorporated in my day to day. Like, I do still pride myself on making life a sacred ceremony every day as much as I can, because why the fuck shouldn't it be? Our life is special. We only have one. We're here to experience it one time. Well, some may say multiple times, but anyways, I'm in this body, this
Right.
life. So now being able to be more fluid, forgiving, graceful for myself brings me back to that place. And it doesn't always look the same. Like, it isn't always this like, colors and kind of a ecstasy type
Mm,
feeling as it felt that day. But it's a reminder of, I'm able to remind myself by giving myself permission to like say that my self-care right now looks like eating a bowl of cereal after my kids go to bed. Like, that is my self-care these days. Sometimes having a glass of wine after they're in bed, taking a bath. That is my self-care. That is my connection to myself, because that is what is accessible in my day-to-day, because I don't have the time to sit down and have a cacao ceremony once a month or once a week, or to have a closed-eyed meditation or take a run or do any of those traditional tools every day. So giving
mm,
myself permission to make it look like what it needs to look like that day.
mm,
Hopefully that
mm-hmm.
answers
Yeah, no,
that.
that totally answers it. And like hearing you say that back, I'm like, okay, so maybe I do that. I want to share my experience of what I would consider finding myself in like one moment, right? Like I think I find myself all the time, right, in different capacities. But There've been a couple of trips, one of which I'll talk about a little bit later, so I'll save that. But I had a breathwork session um, at a facilitator training in Austin with the group that I got my coaching certification with. And our instructor, Alexa, was incredible. And she led us through, I think it was hypertrophic breath work. I can't remember yeah. So it was a more complicated type of breath work. And she held a huge group of people, which is wild to think of as a facilitator because we were in this huge room and she held and supported the space beautifully. And I remember actually there were two experiences, and I'm changing my mind on what I'm going to share mid sentence because I'm remembering so clearly at the same facilitator training, and that breathwork session was really great. We did a visualization that was led by my good friend Ashley Garcia. I will tag her in this. And she was a student, like she was one of us. She was not even a facilitator, but she has this gift of leading a large group, and she did a visualization with us. We were all in this circle, and she led us through so specifically what to visualize through this meditation. And the whole premise behind it was, what is your why? Like, why are you doing this? Who are you serving? What do you know, because it was a facilitator training. And I remember I wrote, she walked you through visualizing, like getting up in the morning and walking to your car and putting your keys in the ignition and driving to your office. And what does your office look like? What does it smell? And all of those things, which I'd never experienced a visualization like that intensely described. Right. And I remember, and now let me give you a little backstory. So I'm at this facilitator training. I've got long blonde extensions in my hair, which felt so foreign to me. But anyway, like just to give you some backstory. And at the very end of the meditation and visualizing, she tells you to go into your bathroom and to look in the mirror. And what do you see? What does your hair look like? What does your face look like? What clothes are you wearing? And I remember the Charli that I saw in that mirror was not the Charli I saw in the mirror that morning when I got ready for training that day. She looked very different. She had actually dark hair. It was curly. I had on like this white tank top and these really like flowy hippie pants, which I love, and I have like 10 pair in my closet. Um, and I remember when I opened my eyes after it was concluded and I thought about that person on the other side of that mirror and what I looked like today, it was like this big awakening for me of I'm not there yet. Like I'm not who that person will be, but I'm going to work so fucking hard to get to her. And what I took away from it was, no, I may not like, I didn't come home and like dye my hair brown and start wearing it curly. Like that's a whole nother thing. I'm too gray for that. Um, but what I realized is that in these moments of looking in a mirror, right, whether it's a visualization or a meditation or whatever capacity you want to look at it, you've got to be able to connect to what's inside of you. And what's inside of you doesn't always look or feel like what's outside of you, like on the outside. And I remember coming home and specifically sharing that story with Colby and thinking to myself, like, I've always had this weird entanglement of what people look at me and expect me to be like versus what they talk to me and hear me be like, if that makes sense. And it was like this full circle moment of I've got to connect to who I am on the inside so people will connect to me, or that people will feel safe with me or come to me and like whatever. And I did. I took my extensions out immediately. I cut all my hair off because it felt so disingenuous to who I was or what felt right. Um, like I said, I'm definitely not brunette and like super curly or anything, but that wasn't the point. It was like I needed to go back and ask, like, what felt more like me. I quit wearing heels, which this is kind of a funny side note. I had like this whole epiphany where it was like, I've been married for 14 years, together with my husband for 16 years at this point. So my entire adult life at this point. And when we would get dressed and go out to dinner or go on date nights or go on vacation, like I dressed the way I thought he wanted me to dress
Mm.
and what I thought he would be attracted to. And what always ended up happening is I was so fucking uncomfortable. Like whether my feet hurt or I hate wearing dresses because I hate like sitting uncomfortably with my legs crossed and not feeling like I can get in and out of a car comfortably. And so like I always consider myself like a Jennifer Aniston style, like jeans and a cute tank top and some heels is like where I thrive, right? Heels,
Mm.
not really, not anymore. And I had this like come to Jesus, which is what my mom would say with Colby. And I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this shit anymore. Like, if you're not going to be attracted to who I am, and I remember him looking at me like, I never asked you to wear any of that shit. Like, that was all you, right? And I had to take really, really strong accountability for the role I was playing in that. Like I was making it his fault without it ever having anything to do with him. Like it was the idea of what I thought I was supposed to look like and how I was supposed to act and all these things. And I did. I quit wearing heels immediately. I only wear Jordans or like cute little sneakers, even with my dresses, like cocktail dresses. I went to a wedding in Positano, Italy, and wore white Adidas's with my expensive ass cocktail dress and a fur. And I was like, this is me. Take it or leave it. Like I am not that girl anymore, right? And that was such a big moment for me to come back to who I was on the inside. And it's like my husband's more attracted to me now than he has ever been because
Mm.
I'm authentic. Like I am me. I am who I was supposed to be. He's more attracted to that version of me than he ever was the girl in the cocktail dress with the terribly uncomfortable high heels, right? Um and for me, I asked you to share kind of how you come back to that person. It, it looks different for me every day, right? It may be me putting on the heels because that's my pattern and then looking at myself in the mirror and saying, no, this is not her. This is not you. Or it may be like I implement grounding at the beginning of almost all of my coaching sessions, unless like shit's hit the fan and we need to dive right in because I need that. I need that space in between
Yeah.
coaching sessions to ground me, calm me. I also realized when I had my very first panic attack, which was 4 years ago, I realized over time the things that calm my anxiety and what they are is getting my ass outside and my feet on the ground, which people call grounding. And there's a reason why that is so impactful, like looking at screens and being constantly stimulated or having earbuds in our ears. Like it's overwhelming. And it's not the way we were meant to live our lives. So going outside for me is a really big kind of adjustment. Breath work, and I'll talk about that session later if it comes up organically, but breathing, like calming your breath, um, all of those things are so helpful. And I think it's so important to have that moment, however you can find it, right? Like, what are some other ideas besides cacao and visualization, breath work, anything that you would recommend to people to get in
Movement,
touch with themselves?
movement, move, dance, walk, run, scream, like make
Scream.
sense, scream, like use your body, and which I think is like a layer of unlearning, like because we're taught we're supposed to move in a certain way. Like if I mean, I used to run and I remember experiencing like this is how I'm supposed to run because this is what you look like when you run. But like you can skip, like give
Mm. Or
permission.
skate. God, I want a pair of roller skates so damn bad. Yeah.
Movement. So any kind of movement, just fucking move. Put on music and move. I say dancing because it's the most easily accessible. Like you don't have to go to a class. You can do it in your home in a room by yourself. Um, take a bath, water. So when you were talking about that, like going outside, I was thinking like I remember when I had my first kid, my daughter, that like one of the things that I remember reading was like if your baby is freaking out, two of the quickest, fastest ways to like help them settle is go outside or put them in a bath.
Mm.
And it's still true as humans. And I think like or as adults. a lot of the things that we used to do as kids, because we weren't told how we were supposed to do it, are the things that still bring us back and to
Mm.
to our true nature. Like, but as we grow up and as we see women in heels and we see what we're supposed to be like, our that inner child, that inner self gets stifled and repressed. And so it's really just a remembering of these like really simple things. Like, I
Mm.
feel like in the self-help world, we try to overcomplicate it so much, and it's really simple things like
Yeah,
taking a
you talking about dancing, like, so part of this like coaching certification I did, we like experienced all kinds of modalities to be able to see like what felt good for us and what we would want to teach or offer to clients. And one of the things we did was this embodiment practice. Um, and embodiment can be in so many, uh, come out in different ways. But for this one in particular, it was dancing with music. And she played this one song, and I will tag it in the show notes, Primavera, which till this day is like my number one like fire song. And it was a class at night, and it's like a classic music type of thing. And our assignment, and it was crazy because it was like a virtual Zoom class, and so we all turned our cameras off. I turned the lights off in my office. I had my blinds closed. It was nighttime, and the only thing that was lit up was just like my screensaver. So it was like this blue vibey color in the room. Played this song. It's like 8 or 9 minutes long. It's a long song. And she basically was like, just move your body, whatever feels natural. And I remember, because it is classic music, I immediately went to like this ballet mindset of like, I'm performing, like I am, and my eyes were closed and I was moving my body. And that shit felt so good. And I remember it was like this high that I don't even think a drug could touch for me anyway, because it was like I was on top of the world. Like I felt so connected to who I was inside. I felt like a kid, right? Like anything that brings you back to this kid like nature and simpleness, right? It is transformative. Anything that takes you back to like those simpler times and uh, no complications, all of these things is the stuff to hold on to. Coloring. Oh, we talked about this the other day. Like we were trying to come up with something to do for a friend of mine's birthday, and it was like color. Like, how whatever other things you want to add to that, and then sit and color and see like how that is so childlike. And art, like putting your hands in stuff like clay or paint, and just like it's it's intoxicating, right? But it's also like it's like this play therapy, right? That people talk about a lot, like how it can be so informative of like who you are and what feels good for you. It's just like playing. And I do think you brought up, the motherhood part. I would have never learned who I was if I wasn't a mother. And I'm not, it's not for everybody. And some people don't want kids. And I think that that's great for them. But for me and my journey, I had to have Sailor to unlock this version of myself. I would have never been able to get past like that certain level without that breaking me wide open. Like it's also the hardest fucking thing I've ever done, right?
yeah. Yeah.
But I can't imagine who I would have been had I not had her. I do want to talk a little bit, and I'm not really sure what this topic will end up being because I feel like we're just flowing really organically here. I want to talk about the shift without going super deep into your motherhood journey, but just the shift of who you were before and who you are now, and learning her and how you've learned through having kids, what that experience has been like.
Well, I think you referenced it, like it completely breaks you open in a way, becoming a mom. And to tie in, like, I'm learning through Limerence, my daughter, every day. And it is finding the kid in me. Before I had a kid, if I was going to do some kind of ceremony or mindfulness practice, the words joy, play, laughter never hit the paper.
Mm,
After having a kid, it is like all I strive for is to be more joyful, more playful, more uh free, more flexible with
mm,
myself because I see her, and it's like when you talked about the dance, like I watch her do that, like just start all dancing with her eyes closed. Like she's not thinking about how she's moving. Like she's just experiencing her body in the air around her. And
mhm,
at what point do we stop doing that? Um, so yeah, I mean, before being a mom, I was very avid yoga practice every day. Now I have a dance practice every day. Like hopefully I get to do some yoga, but like that's where trying to be more silly, trying and it's something that I have to literally try at. Like I'm not good at silly. I'm not I'm actively trying to be for my kids, but for myself because it's you start to like dive into these modalities of getting to know yourself and a lot of it comes with a bunch of weight and a bunch of heaviness and a bunch of like I've got to do this. If I don't do X, Y, and Z, I'll never meet myself or I'll never get fulfilled or we like no, like
mm,
it doesn't look one way and it changes all the time, but at its core like it's permission, it's freedom, it's to be silly, to do the art, to take that leap, to go on a date by yourself to a pottery class because I'm curious about pottery and I'm not going to wait for a friend to do it. Like taking that step is I feel like it's just essential. It's just essential.
mm. Yeah. The silliness part, it's just like life does not have to be so damn serious all the time because you miss out on the joy. You miss out on the silliness and the fun. And for me, having Sailor brought that back into my life, like with more permission, right? I could have always done it before I had her, but it didn't feel like the grown up I was supposed to be, right? Because I wasn't a kid. I didn't want anyone to think I was a kid or immature. But somehow unlocking that by having a child meant I'm doing this for her, right? I'm getting a lot out of it, but you can't judge me for acting ridiculous because I'm doing it for my kid, right? And it's almost like it just gives you permission where maybe you didn't think you had it before. And at least that was my experience. And,
Mhm.
Sailor and I do a dance party almost every single night in the kitchen. Whitney Houston, I want to dance with somebody is our favorite. I say a lot about her, and this could be just about kids in general. I don't think it is kids in general because I'm around a lot of other kids and I don't feel the same way. But I do feel like this about Limerence because I've seen the two of them together. I say this about Sailor. She is the most unashamed human I've ever met in my life. And I'd probably say the same about Lemmy too, like because I felt that energy coming from her. And it's like she's not worried about what other people are thinking about her. If anybody's looking at her, she doesn't care if anybody else is on the dance floor. Like she's raving until she passes out, right? Like until her energy is just gone. And she doesn't care what anybody thinks about her. And I'm so jealous of that, right? I'm
Yeah.
so enamored and intoxicated by that. And I'm learning from her and trying so hard not to stifle that at the same time because it's just like I need to see her live like that so that I can give myself permission to do the same. And
Hmm.
I think that's been my experience with motherhood. And I've shared this in some capacity. I'm not sure where, but I thought she was a boy. I was calling her Mason Thomas. Like that was his name. Like I just knew it was a boy. No questions asked. I was going to be a boy mom. And when I found out it was a girl, I was terrified. Terrified. I have all sisters. I knew I was a like difficult child and oh my
Hmm.
God, what does this look like? Blah, blah, blah. And then I remember fast forward like 2 years later, we're walking down, I think we were in Miami and I'm walking down the boardwalk in a swimsuit and no cover up. Okay. just hanging with me. That is not me. I am super modest. I do not want anyone to see me. Like if I'm in a swimsuit, I'm in like a good angle. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not walking, I'm not moving, I'm sitting still, probably laid flat, whatever it is, right? I found myself walking down this boardwalk with a swimsuit, walking, not holding my breath or holding my stomach in. And I'm watching my daughter in front of me walking without a care in the world. And it clicked in that moment. And I'll never forget the moment because I started crying and I looked at Colby and I said, I was always meant to have a girl. Because if I hadn't had a girl, I would not be so intent on showing her this side of me to give her permission to do the same. I don't want her to see me cover up and like only sit a certain way. I don't want her to see that. And I have to live that 24/7 if that's what I want to show her. I needed someone to force me to do that. I wouldn't have done that for a boy. It wouldn't have even occurred to me. I don't
Mhm.
talk about food around her. I don't use the word diet. The F word in my house is FAT, not FUCK. Like that's my favorite word. But fat, you are not allowed to say in my house whatsoever. That's the F word. And
Yeah.
I needed to live like that for myself, but I needed someone to come into my life to force me to do it. And that's what she did. So I think, so yeah, like motherhood for me was finding myself, the visualization, breath work, things like that. But I also think, like, I say this a lot in coaching containers. Pattern breaking is like this really popular thing that people talk about all the time. Like, you got to break your patterns, break your patterns. Well, I don't really believe in that. In that, I don't think that that's totally doable or realistic because there are patterns ingrained in us that we'll spend our lifetime trying to break and we'll probably never get there. To me, the thing that I always really dig deep with clients is just know what they are, right? Be able
Aware.
to articulate and be aware of them so that you can stop your reaction before you go off into a spiral, right? Like, and I give this example because this is just real for me. Like, if my shirt gets caught on a door handle, I'm gonna lose my shit. Like, that's my pattern. Like, I get so annoyed and I'm like, God damn it. Like, whatever. The key for me is not letting that ruin my entire next hour. Like taking a moment, being pissed off, and moving on, right? And I use that as a really simple example. I'm not going to be able to break the pattern of that not pissing me off. I, I'm not. Like, that's just who I am. That's like the common core stuff, right? For me, not common core, but like core stuff. Um, and so, like, to me, you have to be able to see it actually happening and saying, that's a pattern. Why do I do that? Digging a little bit further. And maybe it's journaling, maybe it's working with a coach, maybe it's therapy, breath work, whatever modality you want to dig into. That's part of learning yourself and like
Mm,
getting to know yourself. And I say this a lot too, like, I am the only person I'm going to live the rest of my life with,
yes.
period. And if I don't love her, I am going to be miserable forever, right? Because I can't get away from her. My mom says this quote, no matter where you go, there you are. And I have it tattooed on my arm, there you are. Because it's like, I can't run away from myself. I can't be mad at myself because then who do I go to? Right.
Yeah.
And I also can't make anyone else in my life happy. I can't. That's the biggest takeaway I took about working with my coach is I can't make my husband happy. I can't make my mom happy. I can't make my sisters happy. I can't make my friends happy. I can only make myself happy and be a, a, a good part of their life or a good infectious person that they can come to. But I can't actually do anything for their happiness or their sadness. I can't fix them. Right. I was pouring all of my energy into other people and not into myself. And so that was a great learning moment for me is I have to learn who this girl is. And over time, it's like you have these moments of like, aha, that is a pattern. I didn't even realize I did that. Or like, why am I pissed off? Period. Why
Mhm.
am I pissed off? And going backwards. What am I mad about? Who wronged me? Where did this come from? What in my childhood am I like running from or not addressing? Things like that, because that's how you get to know yourself. that's how you start to learn to like you or respect. Like inner child work is something I work on with a lot of clients, and some people are ready for it and some people aren't, and that's fine. But some people fail to forget, like, I'm 36, but I'm also 25, 16, 12, 5. I am still all those other versions of myself inside of me. And if I run from her or hate her or any of
Um,
those things, like, I'm disrespecting myself. I'm not, and that little girl is going to come up in a million other ways screaming for attention.
mm,
And so thinking about those things, if you're prepared or ready for that, and going to those places, like, who was she, what does she want, what is she sad about, those types of things, which is something we can get into in a whole nother episode. But yeah, that's kind of my.
it's funny, like literally 2 nights ago, when we were doing coaching, you offered this to me and I didn't do it at that time. I put a picture of myself up on my bathroom mirror as a kid, like 4 or 5 year old, for the first time. And I've been talking to her. And like,
Mm,
I recently had an experience, a different, some like somatic experience where I started meeting my inner child and starting to work with her more. And so when I was unpacking right the other day, I found this picture and I was like, it's time. And I put it up. And so yeah, and I think that the to kind of carry on to what you were saying and tie it into everything we've been talking about, getting your shirt caught on the door handle and that like pissing you off and ruining it, ruin your next hour. Like we all have those patterns, right? And step one is being like, oh, this is a pattern. Every time this happens, why am I so annoyed? Looking at that first, but then also being able to be like, I'm always going to be a human, and like I'm always going to like you're saying, like I'm always going to have patterns. And so like I feel like there's so much freedom and just recognizing what your patterns are. So then that way you're like, oh, that's just that part of me. Carry on. Next.
mm,
Like after you're able to look at it and have the awareness of it, then we can like forgive ourselves, accept ourselves, find radical self love, because we're not like nose diving too deep all the time into our patterns. Like learning what they are, knowing them, implementing things in our life to kind of like help us be able to not let it piss us off for the hour. But then
mm,
also, like, we cannot go through our day thinking that we're never going to get annoyed, right? Because we're
mm-hmm,
like a whole spectrum of emotions that we're meant to feel, supposed to feel. And I feel like that's what we're trying to teach our daughters is like, it's okay to feel everything and live with all of those things inside of you. Like,
mm,
it's okay to feel this, it's okay to feel that. And when I feel this, because this is a pattern, this is something I can do about it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people, uh, they see people go on these like healing journeys, like on social media or whatever, and they think, oh, if I do this, I'm going to be cured, right? I'm no longer going to have anxiety. I'm no longer going to have depression. I'm no longer going to have sadness. Like everything is going to be rainbows and butterflies 24/7. And that's not real life. And I think that, you know, sadness, anxiety, fear, happiness, they're all ways of our body communicating with us in different moments, right? And like anxiety, I really feel like everyone feels anxiety to some degree, right? And some people really do need medical support, right? Medication of some sort to balance their because it is a chemical thing in your brain.
Yeah.
But I also tell people sometimes too, like, you need a healthy level of stress and anxiety to function, right? Like you need to be scared of things. You need to be overwhelmed or anxious because it's your body's way of saying you need to shift. This
Yes.
isn't working. change, whether it's the people in your life or the influences that you're around or the media that you're consuming, it's your body's way of telling you something is wrong here, right?
Mm.
Now, there's varying degrees of that, and you have to know your body well enough to know like when you need to make the decision to ask for help and, if it's something that's manageable. But don't run from it if you've never experienced it before. Like, feel it so that you can know for sure what it is. Look around you. What can you change? What can you shift? Obviously, I'm only talking to people who have like, a relative amount of anxiety. Um, so take from
Educate.
this what you will. Yeah, educate yourself, like talk to your doctor. And, I will say too, like when you go to your doctor, they're just gonna put you on something, right?
Yes.
And maybe you try it and maybe you say, "Oh my god, I don't feel anything," right? And then you come off of it and you go back and forth. Like I do this with a lot of clients too because I have a lot of clients that are medicated or work with a therapist at the same time as me, and I'm always reminding them, don't be afraid to shift. Like, don't be afraid to try another medication. Or, like, so many of us are such people pleaser. You give us one pill and we're like, okay, I'm going to die on this hill. Like, this has got to work. I'm not going to try anything different. But you have to dig into that, right? Like, you can't run from those feelings. You've got to feel them in some capacity to know what they're there for.
So yes, so much. I can go on such a soapbox on the like medication thing, and this is just such a just one example. But like I am diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I also have an eating disorder called RFID. I didn't know these things, like whatever. I went to therapy after I did all of my spiritual modalities and after I had a kid, and my therapist told me that I needed to be on a medication. And all of the spiritual modality person in me, all the woo woo person in me was like, hard no, hard no, hard no. I don't do that. I'll like find the herbs and I'll do this. And
Mhm.
I got my medical marijuana license. And needless to say, my point is just because a doctor told me I needed it or a therapist, because I also went to a medical doctor that also prescribed me a medication for my anxiety disorder. Just because that was given to me does not mean that had to be my choice for myself. My bigger takeaway is, oh, I have anxiety disorder. This is my pattern. What
Mm.
do I want to do with that? I have a choice. Just because someone else is saying this is what you should do doesn't mean that I have autonomy over my body. I know every human knows what's best for themselves, and I think that that's a place where when we're constantly kind of like seeking outward, or like we were talking about in the last podcast, like people injecting their fears, their assumptions into our life, we lose that compass, that inner knowing of like, this is right or wrong for me. Educate yourself on yourself. Use a coach, use therapy, use journaling, use a consistent practice. Find a tool that is going to let you know, that is going to let you objectively observe yourself.
Mm.
From there, decide, what do I want to do? What do I want to incorporate in my life to help make shifts so that I fucking feel better? Because
Mhm.
this doesn't feel good.
Mm.
I want to feel better. So what do I want to do about that? And there is a plethora of options out there.
Mm. I loved that. I loved that soapbox. That I felt that in every cell of my body, and could not agree more. I feel like we need to make like a separate, there's so many, just add like five more things to our list of things to talk about, right? But just for time's sake, to wrap up this particular conversation, before we dive into another one, because we could talk for hours. I do want to go back to your hype list and get you, because obviously this is the hype squad. Every person I have on here, every woman I have on here, we talk about something you've accomplished and something that you've overcome. It's just a way of building yourself back up, reminding yourself that you're powerful and that you are capable of hard things. And it's something I have all my clients do, is create their hype list. So anyway, I want to hear one of your accomplishments and one of the things that you've overcome.
So going with today's theme, overcome, I'm going to say, accepting that I have a diagnosis, and that was something big for me to overcome, because so much of me didn't want to accept that, because there's so much in the industry that I've worked in for years that says like, oh, well, if you do that, then you accept a label about yourself and then you're going to be pigeonholed to that. So like overcoming that, and then I feel like a big accomplishment for me has been in the acceptance of I am the only one that knows what's best for me, and that it is going to change every day. And in myself, being in my self-care routine, like being able to let go of what I think my self-maintenance should look like, being able to be present to what it needs to be today. Like, that's been a huge accomplishment for me, because like that's why I ended up in a therapist's office, because the first 2 years of me being a mom, I was like, why can't I meditate for 20 minutes a day? I just need to do this. I need to do all these things, and I can't fucking do it. It's making me crazy. And it made me crazy.
God, isn't that the truth? Like, could somebody just give me a moment of peace and quiet? Like, could you please leave me alone in the bathroom or in the shower or wherever?
Have like no sounds.
No, I know, right? Cynthia, I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you to come on again. I can't wait to talk to you more. And I'm going to put in the show notes how everyone can find you, follow you, see what you've got going on. And I look forward to having you back on. So,
Yay.
all right.